Hey there! In this part 2 of 3 videos, we cover my recommended graphic design layouts for your presentation pages. If you missed part 1, we decided to use Adobe Acrobat because it's free, universal, and has high quality output. It's just the way to go, whether it's on screen or print. Another recap is our requirements. We're going to be 11 by 8.5 inch landscape format and 3300 by 2550 pixels, which is based on the 300 pixel per inch resolution. We also want to make all of our files way under 25 megabytes because that's the limit of most emails, but 10 megabytes is way better and easy to do. Let's talk about why I'm going to give you a specific layout. So in looking at a lot of art and portfolio books, I've noticed a common theme of just simplicity. You'll see titles, boxes of text, and images in the same place, especially every time they start a new project. So this clean layout really helps them communicate. For you as a student or beginning designer, a simple layout is going to be way easier to update. I've seen people get tortured with their layouts. So if you have a simple template, that just makes everything easier to slide in or update at any time. These are my reasons. Okay, I broke these into 7 concepts. This is a really annoying long list, but we'll be jumping into the PDF and I'll show you specifically an example of what I'm talking about. So let's just start with number 1, first read, second read. This is one of the best tips I ever got because I used to put a lot of stuff on a page that was all the same size and I ended up with a lot of collages. So in this first page, you'll notice that there's only one image, but it fills the page. So if there was a second image, which we can actually see on other pages, there's always one that is primary and everything else is secondary. And it's easy to do, just make the primary image twice as big as everything else. Otherwise, there's a competition for your attention. Okay, point number 2 is margins. Notice stuff does not get too close to the edges. I've seen a lot of beginner students have text touch or even just fall off the page. So you'll notice when we set up some of the files, we were able to pick the margin. If not, I like to go with somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. If you're dealing with pixels, that'd be like 100 to 150 pixels. So notice there is the same margin around all the pages, but also you have internal margins. So here's a couple images that get close, but there's some separation there. That's all we're talking about. Okay, concept 3 is fonts. This is a really big deal for beginners also. I've seen pages with upwards of 5, 6, 7 different fonts. So it's okay to have the title be anything crazy you want, like Supermove. That should be something that reflects the theme of the product or design or line. Most of your other text should be pretty crisp and clean. Sizing is also important. Let's talk about that. Mine, I believe, is all 11 points, so anywhere between 10 to 14 points is going to be perfect. Any descriptive text, like you see over here at the beginning, should be brief. Do not have it go down to the bottom of the page. You want 3 to 5 sentences, and that's really pushing it. Now notice, this is my body or my copy text, and I have some labels or descriptions over here, and I have some call-outs. They're all the same size. I just find that's a little bit more elegant and less distracting instead of having fonts all over the place. Let's check the other page. I do have some titles that are slightly bigger and in bold, but you'll notice that we're using the same fonts, whether it's the small descriptors or the dimensions. And our final page, it's the same thing here. Okay, and you're going to ask, which font do I use? I recommend you go with one called Open Sans. It's very clean and elegant. It's free. It's available on the Google Fonts website. Also, what's really cool about this is I think there's like 20 or 30 different sizes and weights. Just a final word, these are 100% free. Just don't try to sell them. The next thing on my list, concept number 4, is primary images. I like to also call this the glamour shot. This is a low-level view, and if possible, I try to have the image fade or bleed right off the page. Now, I know I said we have margins, but it's totally cool for images to go past the boundaries of the page. So the question is, how do I render that? Well, I usually pull the camera back a little bit in the rendering software, and then I think for a full-page image, just render it at 4,000 pixels wide. That's all you need. You're all set. Another thing I'm doing here with my primary image is I have a clean white background. Why? Think about the text. It's so easy to go right on top. And this can make your page so much more interesting because the text is now interacting with the image. Concept number 5 is what I call detail or secondary images. We're zooming in, and this utility bell here is the perfect example. Something we didn't notice in any other view, but we want to show off the work. So again, I'm making it with a white background, if possible. It's not always critical, so that we can put text right on top of it. Now, if you have multiple images like we do here, we've got this composite scale reference right next to the utility bell or detail shot. Try to line those guys up, top and bottom, and leave a little bit of a margin. Another thing I like to do recently, I don't know if it's trendy or not, just have rounded corners. Okay, concept 6 is what I call details. So let's go back to the first page. And details are things like callouts. These are amazing. Imagine this image with no text. It would kind of look boring or lonely. Still cool, but it's like something was missing. So here, for almost no extra effort, 3 sentences basically of callouts. It looks way more interesting, animated, and engaging. Now, these callouts typically have an arrow. Here's the key with callouts. If you need to point at something, keep that stroke very lightweight. I think mine is 0.5 or 0.75. Just look at the text. It's going to be no bigger than one of the strokes of the text. I've seen people with something 10 times that thick. And that becomes the first thing you see, a giant arrow. Also, the arrow should point to the object. This is the description. For callouts or descriptors that don't need to point like a title, you can just put it right below the character. Here is Supermoo, the superhero cow, and Egbert Chickenstein. So I just made those pretty much the same size. A little bit of a bold, pop them because they're titles. So that brings us to concept number 7 in graphic design. I call this stuff to avoid. I do get a little bit of pushback from people from time to time, but I'm going to tell you why I avoid the following: backgrounds, borders, and typos. A background can get in the way of your design. I think a clean white environment like we're seeing here is usually the best unless you have a special case. Perhaps your design is using very white or highly reflective, then definitely go with a gray background so it pops from the background. I try to avoid backgrounds because they can be very distracting, especially if there's like some crazy pattern. Another thing I will always recommend avoiding is borders. So I think there's a throwback to the time in history when images and presentations were printed, mounted to foam core, and taped to a wall. We don't need borders because we have a screen or a projector. Here's my final argument against borders. If this template is working really well for your portfolio and you want to use it on a repeated basis, and all the new projects will pop in using a similar layout, how's it going to look if they all have borders? It is going to be a little bit annoying unless you match all the borders to each other, and that's going to probably be even worse. The final thing I'm going to mention is typos, especially if you're applying for your job and anything in your presentation has a typo. It's going to give a really bad impression. They're going to think this is your best effort because you want the job. In any project, you can always take all of your copy and paste it into anything else like Microsoft Word or Google Docs and just do a spell check. The other thing you can do, and maybe do both, is have another person proofread for you. I think this is absolutely critical and well worth the time and effort to give yourself the best possible chance. Okay, back to our list. Just for a refresher, you can maybe pause this here and write these down if it's helpful, or just watch the whole video again. Anyway, this has been recommended presentation layouts. Next up in video 3 is PDF merging and optimizing, a rare and valuable skill. Okay, I'm done.